Now, today, you have some people who speak gibberish. Is that part of the speaking in tongues? Or what does speaking in tongues entail? And when we speak in tongues, what manner should we use? That is a question which we are going to be answering today on Wednesday on the weekly segments of the Bible question. So I had some people who are saying that speaking in tongues is not in the Bible. No, speaking in the tongues is one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It is there, but we speaking in gibberish, blah blah blah, shakatabola, but in the Bible, no, it is not. And let's take an example of where the disciples spoke in tongues. Let's read what happens. To Acts chapter 2 verse 6, the disciples clearly were saying things which could be understood. They were not speaking gibberish, and no language which could not be understood, as today most people do. People are going to be speaking things which no one can understand or any of that. But we see the disciples, the Acts of Apostles, they speaking languages which were known, and the crowd said each one had them speaking in his own language. This means that whatever they were speaking, they were real known languages. And in fact, the disciples, what they were speaking were known languages. They were not speaking gibberish, as most people do today. Pa shakabola, yay! The other thing to show that it was known languages, the name languages are listed in the Bible. When the disciples were speaking in tongues, the languages which they spoke are listed in the Bible. The language which you speak, can you name it today and say it is a known language in the world? Acts chapter 2 verse 9 to 11, it lists Parthians, Medes, Elamites and others, which are actual ethnic groups with specific languages, confirming the tongues were earthly languages. My friend, you have to understand that whenever you are speaking in tongues, it has to be an earthly language, and do not say you are the one who does not understand that language. When those people were speaking, the people who were there, they clearly knew that this was my language. They clearly knew that this was the Medes, this was the Elamites, this was the Parthians, because it was a known language. So do not excuse yourself by saying that you are the one who does not understand this language. If no one can understand it, my friend, you are rationalizing and you are lying to yourself. The other thing was that the purpose of speaking in tongues was not so that you could show how the prayers were reaching to God, how you are filled with the Holy Spirit. No, the purpose was for gospel proclamation, because they were declaring the wonderful works of God according to Acts chapter 2 verse 11, not making meaningless sounds. The goal was to communicate the gospel across language barriers. So in fact, this was a form of evangelism. This was a form of commission to the world, because there were so many people, and that's why they had to speak in different languages so that they could proclaim the gospel. So the time you are speaking gibberish, shakata bola chala la la wo poke oh, that you're not doing it for any gospel reason. The fourth point is that speaking in tongues at that time fulfilled prophecy, which is in Isaiah chapter 28 verse 11 and Joel chapter 2 verse 28 to 32, which predicted God would speak through other tongues to reach all nations, pointing to real diverse languages. You can read these verses for yourself, and you can see that God had predicted that he would use other tongues, and these tongues were known languages. And listen to this. Paul confirms tongues must be intelligible. They must be heard. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 9, Paul says, unless you speak intelligible words with your tongue, how will anyone know what you are saying? God is not the author of confusion, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 33. If he cannot hear what you are speaking, if you are shakatakabola chakalabola, that is not the Spirit of God. No, God is not an author of confusion. And how will anyone know what you are speaking if it cannot be understood? My friend, if you want to speak in tongues, it has to be something which people must understand and discern from random syllabuses which are gibberish and no one can understand. And you are lying to us that you are filled with the Holy Spirit. The seventh point is that interpretation was required for unknown languages. In church gatherings, if tongues were spoken and no one could interpret, the speakers were to keep silent. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 27 to 28. This means that the tongues were real, but sometimes not understood by everyone present. So if you are speaking Armenian and no one could understand Armenian where you are to keep silent. You are to keep silent, you are not to speak, because sometimes you can speak in tongues but no one can understand. And if no one can understand, then keep silent, because it has to be understood by other people. And the very first use of speaking in tongues was missionary in nature. The Pentecost tongues event was for reaching Jews from every nation under heaven, according to Acts chapter 2 verse 5, showing a clear evangelistic cross-cultural purpose. So today, if you are speaking in tongues, my friend, is it an evangelism, or is it a show off that you are filled with the Holy Spirit and you are saved? If you are doing that, stop doing it, because this is something which has a lot of preachers and gospel singers today, to show how they are filled with the Spirit. That is not evangelism, my friend. And there is no record of apostles using tongues for personal prayer like people do today. When the disciples were speaking in tongues, it was for evangelism. Nowhere in the Acts of Apostles or in the epistles do we see apostles speaking random, ecstatic speech privately. Tongues always had an audience, and this audience had to understand and discern what you are saying. And the last thing as I wind up is that the reaction of the crowd proves understanding. You see, because some mocked them, saying that they were drunk in Acts chapter 2 verse 13. But others were amazed because they understood in their native dialects, impossible if it were gibberish. My friend, the disciples, when they spoke something which people could understand. So I've said that the Bible doesn't condemn speaking in tongues, says it endorses it, but whenever you speak, it must be something which you understand and other people understand. And if you speak something which other people cannot understand, you better keep silent if there's no one is there to interpret it. So those are the rules for speaking in tongues. My friend, if you're in a church which does that, know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Please share this message with the first person God impresses your heart with. I'll see you next Wednesday for another biblical based questions. Bye bye.